Alright, so Cortes, Conquest of the Aztecs. One thing that was clarified for me by people who presumably subscribe to our own command magazines, this was an insert, this whole bound version. This was not the magazine, but it's more of a, this is the gamer's insert. It contains the information for the game, as well as, I don't know if there was a historical article that went with it that went in the actual magazine, but as well as information on other upcoming games and some errata, and then there's DLM, which gives tactics both for this, but it also gives an after-action report in the of another game. Kind of a shame that they didn't have a playtester's after-action report or something of this during play, but whatever. Some feedback, all kind of a lot of the stuff that would go in an S&T, but maybe they just have a certain size for this, and then they shift other information into it to keep printing costs stable or whatever. Anyhow, I probably should not be giving a review for this. That's the first thing, because my playthrough was not sufficient. I made a huge mistake, and some small rules mistakes, but a huge strategic mistake, and I went through this in my wrap, which is the game that I played out on the playthrough is not what you would expect to see at all out of people who kind of know what they're doing with the game. And it completely skewed the game in favor of the Spaniards, I think. There's no way I can really talk to the balance of it, but I could clearly see, wow, I would have had a great use for all those hordes of Aztec crappy troops. Basically in holding a line across the island and using my key knights and stronger units to provide any kind of attack ability. The problem is, again, as I went through in the wrap, that's not the game I was kind of hoping for. After reading the rules, after reading reviews of it, after looking at what it said online, it sounded like there was all kind of cool stuff going on where you got boats moving around, bombarding the shore, and this, that, and the other. Okay, more from reading the rules than anything else. But a significant amount of the rules are basically to prevent the Aztecs from being able to do anything with their canoes and this, that, and the other. Not directly, but in the sense that the Spaniards can pretty much knock it down to a simple fight over the island and only the interior of the island. And what it becomes, I suspect, now this is just projection and you can watch the playthrough and see if you agree or not, but I suspect what it comes down to is a game more about the geometry and maintaining a steady line for the Aztecs, and threatening the Spaniards, who have a lot less pieces. They might have trouble maintaining that steady line across the island, even with their allies in play. So they kind of have to fight in one sector, I think. And one in which the idea of the Aztec traps and the Spanish charges kind of dominate the flow of the play. And obviously if the Aztecs can throw an attack into place and manage to get some sacrifices, then they get an odds increase for the rest of that battle. You have this kind of neat aspect of being able, as the Spaniards, to say, whoa, we need a timeout. You know? And that's kind of cool, although you probably can't take more than one or two of them. And I can see where this would all be interesting. Unfortunately, again, it's not what really captivated me. I had this, I don't know, maybe kind of like with the Siege of Tyre, where the boats are actually fighting and able to do something. But the truth of the matter is the Aztecs just cannot seem to stand up to the Spanish gunboats. The one thing that they do have is that they could run to the shore and jump into the water and maybe overwhelm if the gunboats get split into detachments. Maybe run for a raid or something like that. So I don't know how much of that actually comes into play. One would kind of look at it and say, geez, there's a lot of rules on stuff when they could have just done the interior of the city and said to hell with all that. Of course, the whole game would have looked less interesting if they had done that. So, anyway, not quite what I was hoping for in it, but I think an interesting magazine game with some decisions that you don't normally face, just in terms of how you're going to be trying to cause battles. Instead of just trying to overwhelm the opponent, you might not be able to get that traction against his line without using some of these special rules. Either the traps for the Aztecs, which allow them to pull a Spaniard into the city and just have your way with them and haul them off for dinner. We'll talk about Marvin Harris sometime. Because I don't know if it's established that the Aztecs were cannibals, but this game seems to have accepted, and I know Harris was showing evidence back in his day, back in the early 70s, for it, but it wasn't very well accepted by anthropologists elsewhere, outside of the behavioral anthropology wing. I tend to always be a few decades behind the times in every subject. Yeah, I haven't even figured out that global warming isn't real, and that economics, fiscal cutbacks, I haven't figured out that fiscal cutbacks actually somehow improve the economy. So, I guess you put me back to about 1980. Right. Okay. Back when science was more important. Anyhow, for this sucker, the actual gameplay I think is going to be kind of interesting and such not, and I think it's got a neat take on something that just is never been covered, as far as I know, other than this, in terms of just a really obscure subject in the sense of wargaming coverage, but not an obscure subject in terms of popular imagination. I can't remember his name, the B guy. I had a classic comic of his accounts of the entire Cortes expedition. Bartolomeo something, I don't know. Maybe somebody will remind me on YouTube. Maybe actually Google will allow the comment to appear, or someday allow me to allow comments to appear that are marked as spam. They've really ruined it. Anyway, for this game, if you're interested in this little puzzle aspect of trying to fight an opponent in this bad terrain using these kind of tricky little moves, I think there's an interesting factor here. But there's a lot of promise to all these different kind of tactics that could be undertaken for the overall siege that just seem to dry up as far as I see. I certainly have room for another play of this at some point, and hopefully I'll video it so that you can see a second look at it that's not quite as naive as this one was. All right, let's send this up real sharp.